Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage Series. America, this is your heritage.
You know, the Capitol's not the only place that's loaded up with religious expressions. I love if you walk across the street into the U.S. Supreme Court building. The Supreme Court has worked really diligently to secularize so much of what goes on there. And I do a lot of tours of Washington, D.C., tours of the Capitol building, etc. And the one place I really like least taking a tour or going on tour is the Supreme Court, because they're so determined to rewrite history to match what their rulings are, that if you walk into the Supreme Court chamber up over the top of the court and the friezes along the top, there's Moses up there holding the Ten Commandments. Now, Moses, long flowing robe, big pointed beard, he's got the 2 tablets there. They're numbered 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. They're numbered in Hebrew. The guy who carved that frieze, they have his records on the website for the Supreme Court. He says it's Moses holding the 10 Commandments. But now the court's been saying, oh, 10 Commandments? Can't do that. So what do they say on the tours of the U.S. Supreme Court now? You look up there and say, oh, is that Moses holding the 10 Commandments? They say, no, that's Moses holding the Bill of Rights.
Oh.
You go, the Bill of Rights?
Oh, you're kidding.
But it's in Hebrew. No, it's the Bill of Rights. I thought the Bill of Rights was 4,000 years after Moses. No, it's the Bill of... They're adamant that it is not Moses holding the 10 Commandments. It's Moses holding the Bill of Rights. And you'll hear that regularly on tours. And I continue to check periodically, and they still say, oh, it's Moses holding the Bill of Rights.
Wow.
Well, don't just stop there. Look over to the right side, because there's a lattice work that separates the Supreme Court bar from the Supreme Court bench itself. And that lattice work, if you're a member of the Supreme Court bar, if you're an attorney, you can sit over there and listen to the cases being argued at the court. And it's kind of an alcove off to the side, like the old churches used to have a choir alcove off the side. And there's this golden lattice work, this crosshatch that they have, that separates the attorneys from the proceedings. Well, if you decide you want to go over there and look real closely at the lattice work, everywhere the lattice work crosses is a little medallion. It's a medallion of the 10 Commandments. Over 40 copies of the 10 Commandments on that lattice work to separate the Supreme Court bar from the court. Oh no, we don't have the 10 Commandments in public buildings. Well, if you really want to get ambitious, before you leave the courtroom, as you turn around and you start walking out the aisle to go to the back, just kind of close the doors on the back chamber. And when you do, the U.S. Justices of the Supreme Court are looking at the copy of the 10 Commandments engraved on the back of the doors of the Supreme Court chamber.
Time out. Are you kidding me? You're not kidding me, right?
No.
You're not kidding. Okay, and
there's nearly 50 depictions of the 10 Commandments in the U.S. Supreme Court building. The building says, oh, you can't have the 10 Commandments in the court building.
Okay, the same 10 Commandments that recently was ruled be taken out of a public setting, out of the courtroom.
Yeah.
So they didn't rip off the doors off, and they didn't modify the U.S. Supreme Court.
What they do is they now leave the doors open all the time, so you can't see what's on the back of them. And they tell you that the 10 Commandments you can see is actually the Bill of Rights, and they don't show you the lattice work over on the side or the other copies throughout the building. Now, if you want to go out of that building and go over to the National Archives, which is a really cool building, that's where they house the original Constitution, the original Declaration. You
How
walk
many
into,
copies are there?
Of the original copies, I mean, there is that big one. And then they made copies to give to the 13 states. So each of the states had a copy that they got to wrap up.
Hand-signed, original.
Everything was done. Jackson was the secretary who did the calligraphy work, who pinned it all out. So you've got the original one there that's signed by everybody, and then you've got the others that they did for the states. Okay. So the original one at the Constitutional Convention, there's just one of those. And that's the one they've got there. So they display that, and you walk in, and the National Archives is such a cool building. It's all the official records of the government. Well, you throw open these big bronze doors. They've got to be 10, 12 feet high. I mean, they're massive, they're thick. You throw it open, you walk in, and right in front of you on the far wall, you can see the Declaration. You can see the Constitution. You're standing there in awe. And if you'll take just a moment and look down at your feet, you'll find that you're standing right on the 10 Commandments. Embedded in the floor of the National Archives, there's the 10 Commandments right in the floor. So you push open these big bronze doors, you walk in, and you go, wow. And if you just say, oh, there's the 10 Commandments, you're standing right on the 10 Commandments, part of the National Archives.
Okay, so basically you have to be an idiot to believe this stuff.
Well, what you have to do is you have to not know that it's there. I mean, this is public stuff. It's all over, but who knows it? People go to Washington, D.C. People, between 2 and 5 million visitors a year visit the U.S. Capitol. They just don't notice this stuff because they've been told it's a secular building, so
And
they're not looking for it. They don't talk about it. The surrender of Yorktown occurred in 1781. This Bible was printed in 1782, and the peace treaty with Great Britain was officially signed the next year in 1783. Interestingly, even that peace treaty, negotiated and signed by John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay, reflects the strong religious sentiments of our founding fathers. Notice the opening declaration. It begins, "In the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. Amen." You can still see a copy of the original treaty at the John Quincy Adams State Drawing Room in the U.S. State Department here in Washington. When word of the signed peace treaty reached America, George Washington officially resigned as Commander-in-Chief. In this final picture here in the rotunda, George Washington is informing his military staff and the leaders of Congress of his resignation. In addition to these 8 pictures, which are the centerpiece of attention here in the rotunda, you'll also see several statues of America's heroes and statesmen lining the walls. Each state is allowed to display 2 statues of individuals from their own state. In addition to these 100 statues, there are 5 to 10 other statues here, depending on various displays at any given time. So, if an individual is displayed here, it is indeed a great honor. Very few individuals from across America's long history have ever been accorded this distinction. These statues appear primarily in 4 rooms. Here in the rotunda, but also in the East Central Hall, the Hall of Columns, and National Statuary Hall. This statue, here in the rotunda, is of our 20th President, James A. Garfield. I hold here in my hand a letter from James A. Garfield. In it, he describes how that he had just finished preaching a revival where he personally preached the gospel 19 times, with 34 individuals coming to Christ and 31 of them being baptized. Somehow today we don't typically associate such activities with our presidents, yet this was a part of the life of James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States and a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. If you come out of the National Archives, you look across the street and there's the Washington Monument, right? And who can miss that? 555 feet, 5 1/8 inches tall. You know, it's right. Well, nobody's going to climb up on top of it to see what the capstone says, but up top, it's glory to God. I mean, that's the capstone up top. When they put it there, it was acknowledgement of God. But if you walk inside, they have elevators that take you up and down. And used to, when I was a kid and went in, we took the stairs. You know, we went, and there's a lot of stairs in the Washington Monument.
I like the elevator.
Well, as they were building the Washington Monument, they came into some financial crisis because it was started out privately and they didn't get all the contributions they needed. So people came up with these ideas of let's put memorial blocks in there. We'll put a block in there from the city of New York, and we'll put a block in there given by Philadelphia. And so you could, instead of giving money, you could give a block to construct the Washington Monument. Well, if you take the stairs down the Washington Monument, you'll find that those memorial blocks are loaded up with Bible references, with Christianity, with prayers. There's open Bibles carved in stone all over the inside of the Washington Monument. So, you know, you walk out of the National Archives where you've been standing on the 10 Commandments, you look up, and right across the street, there's a building, but if you walk down the inside, you'll find that inside it's just so many Christian biblical references throughout. So, all over these buildings, and I guess for people who don't come to D.C., there's one other option that they'd really enjoy. The Library of Congress has so many hundreds of thousands of handwritten documents. And what happened here recently was the chief officer of the Manuscript Division of the Library of Congress went in and pulled out a lot of the most religious, most Christian documents and did this display called Religion in the Founding Era. George Washington's original Bible, his family Bible. Benjamin Franklin's handwritten call for prayer at the Constitutional Convention. John Jay, when he was president of the Continental Congress, his handwritten proclamation for prayer for the nation. They pulled all these documents out and displayed them because they got a treasure over there, loaded with our heritage. Cool thing was they scanned all those documents and they put them online so that Americans can see them. So if Americans want to go to the Library of Congress and look at the section called Religion in the Founding Era, you get so many original documents that we no longer see today. But if you'll check any textbook from 100 years ago, you're going to find that this is part of what we taught in schools, but we just don't know our heritage today. There's just nothing secular about the city of Washington, D.C. There's nothing secular about the Capitol or any of the other buildings, except that we're told it's secular and we buy into it. But that's certainly not what the building itself proves, it's not what the history proves, and it's not what the documents prove.
For more information on the American Heritage Series,